From a distance, Foxwood Court looked like the perfect American dream. Two-story townhouses and single-family homes sat in neat rows, each with well-maintained lawns and matching mailboxes. On weekends, you might spot kids playing hopscotch on the sidewalks or neighbors exchanging waves while trimming hedges. The local homeowners association, HOA, played a central role in preserving this postcard-like appearance, setting guidelines for everything from exterior paint colors to the types of flowers acceptable by each front door. But just as every garden has its share of weeds, Foxwood Court had its own pocket of discord, embodied most strongly in a woman named Marissa Farnett, known within the neighborhood by her less-than-flattering nickname, Karen. In her mid-50s, Marissa wore perfectly pressed pantsuits with matching scarves, brandished a clipboard covered in notes about alleged HOA violations, and roamed the neighborhood daily to protect community standards. Many residents whispered about her behind closed doors, remembering the times she scolded them for leaving holiday decorations out 2 days too long or for planting unauthorized succulents along their walkway. Still, the majority of Foxwood Court's residents tried to maintain a semblance of peace. If Marissa, Karen, showed up complaining about a garden gnome, they'd grumble in private but remove it before she filed one of her infamous formal complaints. Nobody enjoyed conflict with a woman who seemed to thrive on it. Little did the neighbors know, Marissa was about to reveal a level of cruelty even they hadn't imagined possible. Her next target would be a family with a toddler, one who desperately needed a simple wagon as a lifeline for mobility. Tristan Monroe was only 3 years old, but had already experienced a whirlwind of hospital stays and medical procedures. Born with a congenital hip disorder, Tristan had recently undergone a critical surgery to realign his femur and correct joint issues that, if untreated, could lead to lifelong disability. Though the operation went well, his leg was braced in a bulky cast that ran from his hip down to his ankle, making normal toddler activities impossible. His parents, Connor and Lydia Monroe, were devoted to his recovery. They converted their living room into a makeshift play area that accommodated Tristan's mobility needs, laying down soft mats and setting up easy-to-reach toys. Their home in Foxwood Court was a compact ground-level unit with a shared hallway leading to a small communal courtyard. The Monroes had chosen it for convenience. It sat close to the hospital and had relatively few steps. In the weeks after surgery, the family faced a dilemma. How could Tristan move around without constantly being carried? He was growing fast, approaching 35 pounds, and Lydia's back ached from lifting him multiple times a day. They consulted a pediatric physical therapist who suggested a lightweight pull wagon as a temporary aid. It wouldn't be as elaborate as a pediatric wheelchair or a specialized medical device, but for short distances around their building, it could offer Tristan some freedom while he healed. The Monroes purchased a small, child-friendly wagon with a padded interior and a sturdy handle. They decorated it with soft stickers of cartoon animals. Tristan loved it from the moment he saw it, squealing with delight whenever Lydia placed him inside. For him, the wagon was more than a toy. It was a symbol of independence. The day after the wagon arrived, Lydia took Tristan out for a gentle walk in the shared hallway. Their unit opened onto a wide corridor with a few other units, leading to a small lounge area near the elevator. Because Tristan's cast limited how much he could move, the wagon allowed him to visit neighbors, look out the window at the courtyard, and simply escape the confines of his bedroom. Everything went smoothly until Marissa Farnett stepped off the elevator. Lydia recognized Marissa's face from the HOA welcome packet. Connor had joked, "Watch out for that one. She's the neighborhood tyrant." Marissa froze the moment she saw the wagon. Her eyes flicked between Tristan, who was happily fiddling with a plush toy, and Lydia, who was pulling the wagon with gentle care. Lydia offered a friendly smile. "Good afternoon," she said. "We're just taking my son for a little ride. He's recovering from surgery." Marissa's lips thinned. "That wagon looks quite large. Are you sure it complies with hallway regulations?" Lydia blinked, taken aback by the brusque tone. "Regulations? We're just going to the end of the hall. He can't walk on his own right now." The older woman took a step forward, her gaze zeroed in on the wagon's handle. "Hallways must remain clear for emergency exits." That contraption is a tripping hazard. She sniffed disapprovingly, brushing invisible dust off her blazer. You might consider more discreet options. Sensing confrontation, Lydia tried to stay calm. We'll be careful. We're not leaving it unattended. It's the only way my son can move around without me carrying him. Marissa's eyes narrowed further, but she said nothing else. Instead, she strode away, her heels clacking aggressively on the tiled floor. Lydia's heart pounded. Was this just a random run-in, or had Marissa latched onto an excuse to harass them further? As Lydia returned to the apartment, she couldn't shake a bad feeling. Tristan, oblivious to the tension, babbled excitedly about wanting another ride tomorrow. Lydia mustered a smile, hoping that the HOA's self-proclaimed enforcer would show some compassion once she realized Tristan's wagon was a necessity, not a whim. Over the next week, Tristan's wagon trips became part of his daily routine. A few of the neighbors found it adorable. They'd wave or bend down to offer him small stickers or treats. It lifted Lydia's spirits to see people supportive of her son's recovery. But whenever Marissa Farnett appeared, her reaction was a stark contrast. She'd glare at the wagon as though it were a personal affront. One time, she caught Lydia in the hallway again. "That wagon is parked too long in common areas," she said, arms folded. "We have strict rules about leaving personal items outside the unit." Lydia tried explaining once more. "I'm right here with my son. We aren't leaving it parked. We're just taking a few minutes for him to rest." Marissa rolled her eyes. "We have designated areas for strollers, bikes, and other large children's equipment. This wagon is not only oversized, it also has no official storage place. It's an eyesore." Lydia frowned. "Please, I've read the guidelines. We're not blocking any exit. Tristan needs this because of his cast." Marissa cut her off. "We'll see what the HOA board has to say," she snapped, then spun on her heel and stormed away. Shaken, Lydia retreated to her apartment. That evening, she told Connor about the confrontation. She acted like a hallway monitor, policing every move. Lydia said, frustrated, "I'm worried she'll file a formal complaint." Connor tried to comfort her. "We'll talk to the building management if needed. We're not breaking any rules." Then, looking at Tristan, who was giggling at the wagon, blissfully unaware, he shook his head in exasperation. "I can't believe someone would have a problem with a toddler's wagon, especially a disabled toddler." Yet the Monroes sensed that Marissa's hostility was more than idle complaining. She saw the wagon as an affront to her precious hallway aesthetics. And based on her reputation, nobody doubted she might escalate the situation. Despite Marissa's grumbling, life in Foxwood Court continued. One bright morning, Lydia took Tristan to the building's courtyard for some fresh air. She carefully navigated the wagon around a small garden area, letting her son watch squirrels dart across the lawn. Other neighbors were out walking dogs or enjoying a morning coffee on their balconies. As Lydia parked the wagon near a flower bed, a warm voice called out, "Hello there." Turning, she spotted Rosa Garza, an older woman known for her community spirit. Rosa approached with a gentle smile. "I've been meaning to introduce myself. I live just upstairs. That's quite a setup you have for your little one. How adorable." Relieved, Lydia returned the greeting. She explained about Tristan's recent surgery and how the wagon was crucial for giving him mobility during recovery. Rosa's expression softened. "Bless his heart," she said, leaning down to wave at Tristan, who responded by shaking a stuffed dinosaur in greeting. "I've seen you in the hall," Rosa continued, "and, well, I also noticed Marissa's sour looks. Don't let her discourage you. That child has every right to be out here enjoying the day." Moved by Rosa's empathy, Lydia felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. It's such a relief to hear someone else say that. She's been on our case, claiming the wagon breaks regulations. Rosa gave a knowing sigh. Marissa Farnett, Karen, as some folks call her, has a long history of picking fights. She once threatened to fine me for having a potted fern in the hallway for more than 15 minutes. But you can't let her run your life. If she files a complaint, I'll back you up. My grandchild uses a walker for therapy, and you better believe I wouldn't let anyone keep him cooped up. That small declaration of support buoyed Lydia's spirits. She learned that others in the building were also fed up with Marissa's tyranny. Maybe, if it came down to it, they'd unite to stand against any unjust measures. Lydia's hope that Marissa might relent vanished the following afternoon. She found a formal notice slipped under her door, emblazoned with the Foxwood Court HOA letterhead. Her heart sank as she read the contents. Attention, Mr. and Mrs. Monroe. We have received a complaint regarding a child's wagon repeatedly parked in the common hallway, which may obstruct passage or create safety hazards. Kindly remove any such items from shared areas to maintain compliance with HOA guidelines. Failure to do so may result in further disciplinary action or fines. Infuriated, Lydia handed the notice to Connor. She must have filed it. Nobody else has a problem with us. Connor frowned at the letter. I'll call the HOA tomorrow. If we have to, we'll explain Tristan's condition and show them it's essential. This is ridiculous. That night, they wrote an email response to the HOA board, detailing Tristan's medical needs and how the wagon was not left permanently in the hallway, but rather used to transport him. They attached a note from Tristan's pediatric physical therapist, which explained that moderate movement in a safe environment would aid his healing. 3 days passed with no reply. Meanwhile, Tristan became restless, stuck inside the apartment. The wagon trips were vital for his mental stimulation as much as for physical therapy. So the Monroes continued taking him out, albeit with a sense of dread each time they stepped into the hall. Late one afternoon, Lydia carefully lifted Tristan into the wagon, buckled a small strap around his waist for extra stability, and stepped into the hallway. She planned a short ride to the elevator so he could see the building's lobby fish tank, a favorite of his. As soon as the wagon's wheels crossed the threshold, a chilling voice echoed behind them. Ah, there you are, ignoring HOA rules again. Marissa Farnett was standing at the other end of the corridor, arms rigid at her sides. Lydia's pulse quickened. She managed a brief greeting. We're just going to the lobby for a few minutes. Without warning, Marissa closed the distance in quick, furious strides. Lydia instinctively pulled the wagon closer to her legs, uncertain what Marissa intended. But she never expected physical aggression. Marissa latched onto the wagon's handle with both hands, yanking it out of Lydia's grip. Before Lydia could protest, Marissa twisted the handle violently downward. A sharp crack pierced the air. The wagon's metal rod snapped near the base, leaving the handle dangling uselessly. Tristan screamed, frightened not just by the sudden jolt, but by the unfamiliar, aggressive stranger. Lydia stared in horror, adrenaline surging through her veins. What are you doing? Stop, Marissa hissed. This oversized toy is a hazard. I told you to keep it out of the hallway. She flung the broken handle aside. Tristan cowered, tears running down his cheeks. Are you insane? Lydia shouted, try to push Marissa away from the wagon. He needs this. He can't walk. Marissa glared, breathing heavily. Then carry him like every other parent of a toddler who can't walk, she spat. We have rules, and I won't let you keep violating them. With that, Marissa turned and stomped off toward the stairwell, ignoring the toddler's cries and Lydia's furious pleas for her to come back and fix what she'd done. Lydia knelt beside Tristan, heart hammering, trying to console him. He was still trembling, tears spotting his pudgy cheeks. She kissed his forehead, murmuring, it's okay, though she herself felt far from calm. The wagon lay at a crooked angle, its handle splintered. At that moment, a neighbor, drawn by the commotion, stepped into the hallway. He hurried over. My God, Lydia, what happened? She couldn't speak without her voice shaking. Instead, she gestured to the snapped handle, tears welling in her eyes. The neighbor, eyes widening, pieced together the situation from Tristan's sobs and the broken wagon. Was it Marissa? He asked, his tone grim. Lydia nodded, trying to keep her composure. She just snapped it in half, she managed. Word traveled fast after that. By evening, half a dozen neighbors had stopped by the Monroe apartment to check on Tristan. Some brought teddy bears, others brought food, hoping to lighten the family stress. Over and over, Lydia recounted the shocking moment of Marissa's aggression. Connor, who had been at work during the incident, was livid when he returned home. She did what? he roared, staring at the broken wagon that Lydia had propped against the wall. "This is assault on our property, endangering our child." They immediately called the HOA's emergency contact number, leaving messages detailing the situation. Lydia also fired off an email to the board, demanding an immediate response. Meanwhile, Marissa's door remained closed, and nobody saw her leave or enter. A few neighbors reported hearing her television blaring, but she did not respond to knocks. The Monroes stayed up late that night, holding Tristan close. He was restless, whimpering whenever he remembered the frightening encounter. Lydia and Connor agreed they needed official action. This had gone far beyond a petty dispute. By the next morning, Foxwood Court buzzed with indignation. News that Marissa Farnett, Karen, had physically broken a toddler's mobility wagon spread like wildfire. Residents gathered in small clusters in the courtyard, discussing the horror of it all. Rosa Garza was among the most vocal. She'd heard directly from Lydia about the incident and wasted no time calling other concerned neighbors. They organized a meeting in Rosa's living room, inviting the Monroes to share their story firsthand. About 20 people showed up, cramped around couches and dining chairs, some standing in the hallway. As Lydia recounted the events, gasps and exclamations rippled through the group. Several neighbors had tears in their eyes when they heard how Tristan had cried in terror. "This is crossing a line," said one older gentleman, fists clenched. "I always knew Marissa was a bully, but to take it out on a child?" A younger mother of twins chimed in, "We can't let her keep harassing families. What if she decides my double stroller is too big?" The consensus was clear. The community needed to confront the HOA and demand Marissa be held accountable. Some suggested filing a police report for property damage or endangerment. Others felt the HOA should immediately expel her from any position of authority. Connor and Lydia listened, touched by the outpouring of support. They agreed to file a formal complaint not just about hallway regulations, but about Marissa's violent behavior. If the HOA board failed to act, they vowed to take it to local authorities. After all, physically harming or destroying a child's mobility aid was more than a petty violation. It was an act of cruelty. That evening, the residents drafted a collective statement titled Community Petition Against Harassment, listing Marissa's actions and demanding a swift response. Each attendee signed it, promising to gather more signatures from neighbors unable to attend the meeting. It didn't take long for the uproar to reach the top. Within days, the Foxwood Court HOA board called an emergency meeting, typically held in a modest conference room near the management office. This meeting overflowed with residents eager to witness the outcome. Some stood in the doorway, while others sat cross-legged on the floor. There was an electric tension in the air, the sense that the entire community was done tiptoeing around Marissa Farnett. At the head of the table sat Donna Whitaker, the HOA president. She shuffled papers nervously, eyeing the crowd. Beside her were 3 other board members. In a corner sat Marissa herself, arms folded across her chest, lips pursed in an unrepentant scowl. She'd been summoned to answer for her actions. "Let's begin," Donna said, tapping her pen on the table. "We have a formal complaint from Connor and Lydia Monroe regarding damage to their child's wagon, allegedly caused by Ms. Farnett." Lydia and Connor were seated in the front row. Lydia cleared her throat and recounted the events, voice trembling with anger and residual fear. She emphasized how the wagon was vital for Tristan's mobility post-surgery. Connor added that the device's handle had been intentionally broken, not accidentally damaged. After their testimony, Donna turned to Marissa. "Ms. Farnett, do you have a response?" Marissa lifted her chin. "Yes, I do. That wagon was cluttering the hallway. The child's mother refused to remove it despite repeated warnings. I attempted to move it aside, and the handle snapped. A regrettable accident, but it wouldn't have happened if they followed HOA rules." Outrage rippled through the audience. "She's lying," someone called from the back. Another voice. "That's not what happened at all." Donna raised her hands for silence. "We have multiple eyewitness accounts suggesting you grabbed the wagon and forcibly broke it, Ms. Farnett. Can you explain that discrepancy?" Marissa pursed her lips tighter, color rising in her cheeks. "Eyewitnesses? Probably the same neighbors who always side against me. They're exaggerating. I used only enough force to move it. A woman in the audience stood up. I was there. I heard the child screaming. Marissa yanked the handle until it snapped. Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. Donna frowned at Marissa. We'll be reviewing official statements and any evidence. For now, Ms. Farnett, I must inform you that this board takes accusations of harassment and property damage extremely seriously. We will deliberate and deliver a decision soon. Marissa sank back in her chair, eyes darting around as if seeking an ally. But the other board members avoided her gaze, and the audience glowered in disapproval. In the days following the HOA meeting, the Monroes were in limbo. Tristan's wagon lay mangled in their storage closet, the handle beyond repair. Meanwhile, the toddler grew irritable and frustrated, confined mostly to the apartment. Lydia and Connor carried him whenever he needed to go outside. No small feat given his cast and his weight. Tristan would sometimes point at the broken wagon and say, "Fix wagon? Go hallway." Each time, Lydia's heart ached. "Not now, honey," she'd whisper, trying to hide her tears. "We'll figure something out." Support poured in from neighbors, who frequently dropped by with meals or small gifts. Rosa visited one evening with cookies, hugging Lydia and assuring her the entire building stood behind them. "Don't lose hope," she said. "Justice might be slow, but it's coming." The Monroes also sought legal advice. A friend of Connor's father was an attorney who suggested they keep thorough documentation and consider a police report if the HOA didn't act. Lydia and Connor agonized over the idea of involving the police. Would that escalate tensions? And what if it traumatized Tristan further? Amid the uncertainty, they got a surprising phone call from the pediatric physical therapist who had previously written a note supporting the wagon. She'd heard about the destruction of Tristan's mobility aid and wanted to help. "I know a company that makes specialized pediatric carts," she explained. "They're safer than a standard wagon, and they're designed for children with leg casts or limited mobility. It might be an option." The Monroes hesitated, mindful of costs. Medical equipment seldom came cheap, yet the therapist promised to reach out to charities that sometimes funded adaptive devices. "Don't let finances stop you from giving Tristan what he needs," she urged. That glimmer of hope propelled Lydia and Connor forward. They might not be able to fix Tristan's wagon, but perhaps there was a better solution on the horizon, one that would outlast the cast and ensure Tristan's safety. Unbeknownst to the Monroes, a group of concerned neighbors, led by Rosa Garza, decided to take matters into their own hands. Appalled by Marissa's callous act, they brainstormed ways to help Tristan regain his mobility and confidence. They formed a small committee, meeting in the evenings to discuss logistics. Rosa took the lead, contacting local charities and specialized equipment suppliers. Another neighbor, Eric, knew a representative at a children's hospital supply company. He made phone calls to see if there were discounted pediatric carts or partial sponsorships available. Within a week, the group pooled resources and launched an informal fundraiser among Foxwood Court residents. People who had previously only nodded at each other in elevators contributed funds, moved by Tristan's plight. One older couple donated $500, saying they felt no child should suffer because of an adult's cruelty. A single mother contributed a smaller amount, but included a heartfelt note. "Your boy deserves to move around with dignity. Don't let anyone take that away." Rosa was astonished by the generosity. Their initial goal was modest, enough to buy a decent second-hand adaptive wagon. But so many neighbors chipped in that they soon raised enough to purchase a brand-new pediatric mobility cart with advanced features, swiveling front wheels, padded seating, adjustable seat belts, and a retractable canopy. They kept the plan under wraps, wanting to surprise the Monroes. Meanwhile, they coordinated with the physical therapist to ensure the model they chose would suit Tristan's post-surgery needs. On a crisp Saturday morning, Lydia answered a knock at her door and found nearly a dozen neighbors gathered in the hallway. Rosa at the forefront, grinning broadly. Behind them stood a large cardboard box adorned with a bright bow. Tristan peeked from behind Lydia, curiosity lighting his eyes. "What's all this?" Lydia asked, both surprised and touched by the group's arrival. Rosa cleared her throat, tears glistening in her own eyes. We couldn't stand by while Tristan's wagon was destroyed, so we decided to get him something even better. With that, neighbors helped carrying the box. Connor joined them in the living room, and with careful hands, they unpacked a specialized pediatric cart. It gleamed in bright primary colors, featuring plush cushioning, a robust handle that locked in place, and side rails to protect a child in a cast. Tristan gasped in delight. "New wagon," he exclaimed, waddling over in his cast. Lydia's eyes brimmed with tears as she ran a hand over the smooth plastic, noticing the harness designed to keep Tristan snug. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "This is incredible." Connor was equally overwhelmed. "Thank you," he said, voice trembling. "You have no idea what this means to us." Rosa patted his shoulder. "We do. We want Tristan to feel safe again, and we wanted to show that Marissa's cruelty won't define this place." It took another half hour to fully assemble the cart, adjusting the seat belts to fit Tristan's size. When the toddler finally settled into it, his grin stretched from ear to ear. He pressed his cast-clad leg against the comfortable interior, tapping the handle with fascination. Lydia gently pulled him around their small living room, tears still sparkling in her eyes. The neighbors watched, some snapping pictures, others wiping away emotion. The sense of communal triumph was palpable. Karen had tried to break the Monroe spirit, but her act had ignited a wave of solidarity instead. While the Monroes celebrated Tristan's new mobility cart, the HOA board continued its investigation. Finally, a notice arrived calling for a second emergency meeting. This time, the board promised to present their decision regarding Marissa Farnett's actions. The same conference room filled again with anxious residents. The Monroes arrived, Connor pushing Tristan in the shiny new pediatric cart. Heads turned at the sight. Some people smiled, others clapped softly. Across the room, Marissa's eyes darted to the cart with palpable hostility. When a meeting came to order, Donna Whitaker addressed the room. "We have reviewed statements and eyewitness accounts regarding the incident in which Ms. Farnett allegedly broke a child's wagon. We have also considered Ms. Farnett's defense that this was an accident. After thorough deliberation, the board has reached a conclusion." She glanced at a folder in front of her. "We find sufficient evidence that Ms. Farnett intentionally destroyed the Monroe family's property, used physically aggressive behavior, and violated our community's code of conduct, which explicitly prohibits harassment or endangerment of any resident, especially a child." A rumble of approval swept through the audience. Marissa stiffened. Donna continued. "Effective immediately, Ms. Farnett is removed from any leadership or enforcement role within the HOA. Furthermore, she is required to cover the replacement cost of the wagon and compensate the Monroes for damages, pending legal finalization if they choose that route." The room erupted in applause. Marissa leapt to her feet, face flushed red. "You can't do this. I was defending the rules, and this is how you repay me," she shrilled, eyes darting around for support. Most residents simply glared back, arms crossed. A second board member, Ms. Tran, spoke up. "We respect the rules, Ms. Farnett, but your behavior went beyond any acceptable boundary. You have endangered a child's well-being." In a huff, Marissa snatched her purse and stormed out of the room. The cheering continued even after the door slammed behind her. Lydia and Connor clung to each other, relief washing over them. They saw no sign of remorse in Marissa's expression, only anger that she hadn't gotten her way. With Marissa stripped of her authority, Foxwood Court breathed a collective sigh of relief. Residents who had once tiptoed around her found themselves feeling freer to chat in the hallway or leave small items outside their doors without fear of complaint. Connor and Lydia began using the courtyard again, pushing Tristan in the pediatric cart. A cluster of neighbors would often join them, sharing cheerful banter. Although the board's ruling was significant, the Monroes weren't entirely free of concern. They knew Marissa still lived in the same building, and they worried about possible retaliation. They even considered filing a police report, but for the moment, they decided to wait and see if the HOA sanctions would be enough to keep her in check. Still, life improved for Tristan. The cart was a revelation, sturdier than the old wagon, equipped with seat belts that supported his posture and easier for Lydia to maneuver. Thanks to the kindness of neighbors, he had more freedom than before. Connor joked that Marissa's sabotage had ironically led them to an even better device for their son. Even Tristan seemed to sense a new confidence. He squealed whenever they left the apartment, excited to explore. The hallway that once held fear for him, echoing the memory of Marissa's angry face, now felt like a safe path to the outside world. A week passed in relative calm. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, as Lydia returned from a short ride in the elevator with Tristan, she spotted Marissa lurking near the mailboxes. No longer dressed in business-like attire, Marissa wore casual slacks and a sweatshirt, hair disheveled. She seemed less poised but still carried an air of hostility. Lydia braced herself, feeling Tristan tense in the cart. But Marissa did not approach them directly. She merely glowered, arms crossed. The tension was palpable as Lydia rolled the cart past her. Just when Lydia thought they might escape unscathed, Marissa hissed, "Congratulations on your fancy new ride. Must be nice to have the whole building pay for your child's toy." Lydia's face burned with anger. "The neighbors donated out of kindness," she said tersely. "And it's not a toy. It's a medical necessity, which you destroyed." Marissa gave a bitter laugh. "Self-righteous neighbors. They think they can turn me into a villain. But I know the rules, and I was enforcing them. You'll see. This building will go downhill without me." Before Lydia could respond, Marissa spun on her heels and stalked away. Tristan whimpered softly, reacting to the tension in Lydia's voice. She knelt and soothed him, reminding herself that this was a woman stripped of her power. Still, the encounter left her unsettled, a stark reminder that even if the HOA had ruled against Marissa, her resentment festered. After hearing Lydia's account of Marissa's venomous parting shot, Connor and a group of neighbors decided it was time to ensure the Monroes were safe from further sabotage. They approached the HOA board with a proposal: installing additional security cameras in the hallways, specifically near the areas where children often played or traveled. Donna Whitaker, already dismayed by Marissa's behavior, approved the idea. The board voted unanimously to set aside funds for a modest security upgrade. Within a few weeks, discrete cameras were mounted at strategic points. Nothing invasive, but enough to discourage further acts of vandalism or intimidation. "It's a shame it came to this," Ms. Tran commented as she oversaw the installation. "But we want parents to feel secure letting their kids roam." Marissa, of course, voiced her outrage online, claiming the cameras infringed on privacy. But the vast majority of residents supported the measure. They had witnessed how quickly petty disputes could spiral into something harmful. Now, if anyone decided to break another child's property, the cameras would capture proof. With these new measures in place, the building felt safer, especially for families like the Monroes. Lydia no longer worried about leaving the cart outside their door for a moment if she needed to grab something. Tristan resumed a semblance of normalcy, and his cast came off a few weeks later, replaced by a smaller brace. He continued using the cart part-time for support until his muscles strengthened enough for walking again. As the days turned into weeks, Tristan's leg gradually improved. Physical therapy sessions helped him regain strength, and the specialized pediatric cart allowed him to venture farther than ever before. The courtyard became his little realm of exploration. He could watch birds flutter around the birdbath or glimpse squirrels scampering up trees. The highlight came one sunny afternoon when Lydia noticed Tristan shifting his weight in the cart as though wanting to stand. She carefully helped him up, holding his hands. He wobbled, but after a moment, took a shaky step forward on his healing leg. The sense of triumph in his wide brown eyes was unmistakable. Neighbors who happened to be present applauded and cheered softly, respecting the delicate moment but celebrating the toddler's accomplishment. Lydia's heart soared. She caught Connor's eye, and he grinned, tears brimming. In that tiny step, all the heartbreak of the past weeks faded, replaced by hope for Tristan's future mobility. That evening, the Monroes emailed friends and family pictures of Tristan's first steps post-surgery, crediting the support of neighbors and the pediatric cart. Even though they'd been through a harrowing ordeal, They felt grateful for the sense of community that had emerged from it. The next HOA meeting, held 2 months after the fateful Wagon incident, featured an unexpected cameo, Marissa Farnett. Despite her removal from any official role, she had chosen to attend as a regular resident, presumably to air grievances. Word of her presence made the atmosphere tense. Donna Whitaker and the other board members went through routine updates, landscaping budgets, exterior paint choices, and the success of the new security cameras. Then the floor opened for community concerns. Marissa stood, clearing her throat dramatically. I'd like to note that the hallways have become more congested since we allowed strollers, carts, and other large items to roam freely. This is a safety issue. A murmur of exasperation spread among those present. One board member retorted, "We have designated guidelines, Ms. Farnett. Residents can move through common areas with necessary mobility aids." "That's not new." Marissa pressed on. "I propose the board reintroduce stricter regulations so we don't have fiascos like that monstrous Wagon fiasco." She glared pointedly at Lydia, who held Tristan on her lap. The toddler, now partially braced but mostly free, clung to his mother. Connor spoke up, voice calm but firm. "Ms. Farnett, the only fiasco was your destructive behavior, and the board resolved it. My son needed that wagon for medical reasons. You destroyed it. Now we have a better card, fully approved by the board. There is no reason for more regulations." Applause rippled across the room. Marissa's face darkened. She cast one last glare at the board and huffed. "You're all delusional, coddling them. Don't be surprised if more clutter piles up." With that, she snatched her coat and exited, leaving an awkward silence in her wake. But the tension quickly gave way to a collective sigh of relief. She might continue her tirades, but the board had made its stance clear. The community supported accessibility and compassion over petty, aesthetic quibbles. Over the next few months, Foxwood Court settled into a new normal. With Marissa no longer wielding power, her objections were relegated to irate emails or the occasional rant in the hallway. Most residents learned to ignore or shut her down politely. The security cameras deterred any further acts of vandalism or aggression. Meanwhile, Tristan's leg continued to strengthen. By early autumn, he transitioned from using the pediatric cart full-time to toddling around with just a soft brace on his leg. Lydia and Connor still kept the cart handy for longer walks or when Tristan felt fatigued, but his doctors were thrilled with his progress. One mild afternoon, as fallen leaves rustled across the courtyard, Tristan toddled across the grass while neighbors watched. He grinned every time he realized he could walk a few extra steps without stumbling. Lydia trailed behind him, the now iconic cart at her side, just in case. Rosa and other neighbors clapped gently, celebrating each wobbly stride. In that serene moment, Lydia felt gratitude surge within her. Yes, they'd been through a traumatic experience, seeing Marissa snap the wagon handle, hearing Tristan's terrified cries. But the cruelty had been overshadowed by an outpouring of neighborly warmth. The specialized cart not only served Tristan's needs more effectively than the original wagon ever could, but it had also become a symbol of community resilience. The Monroes decided they would remain in Foxwood Court, at least for now. They had once considered moving to avoid Marissa, but the love and support they'd received convinced them that this place could be a true home. As time passed, the wagon incident, as neighbors called it, gradually became folklore in Foxwood Court, a cautionary tale told to newcomers about the extremes one person could reach and the powerful sense of unity that could rise up against such behavior. People pointed out the newly installed cameras and explained how they stemmed from a single act of cruelty that mobilized the entire community. Marissa Farnett largely kept to herself. Once in a while, she attempted to file complaints about trivial matters, like a neighbor's doormat color or a child's chalk drawings on the sidewalk, but her credibility was gone. The HOA board, still chaired by Donna Whitaker, took her grievances with a grain of salt, always reminding her that they had to focus on real violations, not personal vendettas. Meanwhile, Tristan thrived. He wore smaller and smaller braces as the year went on, eventually discarding them altogether under the guidance of his pediatric orthopedist. The day he ran across the courtyard unassisted, squealing in delight, was the day Lydia realized her nightmare of seeing that wagon broken was firmly in the past. Tristan was stronger now, and so was their family. One late autumn evening, the Monroes hosted a small gathering in their home to thank everyone who had supported Tristan's recovery. The air was filled with warm chatter, the smell of homemade cookies, and the clink of cups as neighbors sipped hot cider. Tristan toddled around, showing off his near-complete mobility, occasionally returning to the cart if he got tired. Toward the end of the night, as the group thinned out, Rosa pulled Lydia aside. "I've been thinking," she said, "the specialized cart won't be needed forever if Tristan keeps improving. But maybe we can pass it on to another family in the future, someone else who needs a little help." Lydia blinked, touched by the idea. "That's a wonderful thought. This cart could help another child the way it helped Tristan." Rosa nodded. "Exactly. We can store it in my extra garage space. Whenever you decide you no longer need it, we'll find a neighbor or a local child who might benefit. No one should have to face what you faced alone." They shared a tearful hug, reminded once more of the compassion that had blossomed in Foxwood Court amidst the negativity. A full year after the infamous wagon incident, life at Foxwood Court had largely moved on. Tristan was a happy 4-year-old, bounding around with only a slight limp when he was tired. The pediatric cart stood in a corner of the Monroes' living room, still well-maintained, though used less frequently. But a final wave of drama emerged when Marissa Farnett announced she was selling her unit. She posted a bitter note on the community bulletin board, complaining about how the HOA had been taken over by incompetent, spineless individuals and how she refused to live among rule breakers. Few residents were sad to see her go. On her last weekend in the building, Marissa tried to stir trouble one final time. She posted flyers on doors claiming the building was descending into chaos due to unruly children's vehicles in the hallways. Hardly anyone paid attention. The flyers ended up torn down within hours. At sunrise on a Monday, a moving truck pulled up. Marissa supervised the loading of her furniture with clipped efficiency. She left without fanfare, no farewell to any neighbors, no final confrontation. The building was quiet in her wake, almost peaceful. Rosa joked that the sunshine felt brighter that morning, as if Foxwood Court breathed a collective sigh of relief. Lydia and Connor watched from their balcony, making sure to keep Tristan inside so he wouldn't risk a final run-in. They felt an odd sense of closure, seeing the woman who'd caused them so much distress drive away for good. In Marissa's absence, the overall mood at Foxwood Court improved noticeably. The HOA instituted a more transparent system for addressing concerns. Residents could submit issues online, and the board would respond publicly, ensuring less room for arbitrary enforcement. They even set aside a portion of the budget to explore child-friendly improvements, like a small play area in the courtyard. As for the Monroes, they focused on Tristan's continued progress. He attended a preschool where his teachers accommodated his still-developing mobility. The pediatric cart sat in the hallway less and less, only used when Tristan wanted a longer excursion. Eventually, the day came when Tristan no longer needed the cart at all. His pediatrician beamed, congratulating him on a full recovery. Lydia remembered the heartbreak of seeing their original wagon shattered and felt a swell of gratitude for how far they'd come. They decided to pass the cart on, as Rosa had suggested. Through a local special needs parenting group, they connected with a family whose daughter had similar mobility challenges. The father came by one afternoon to pick up the cart, his eyes misty with appreciation. "You have no idea how much this helps," he said, voice trembling. "Thank you." Lydia and Connor watched him leave, cart in tow, feeling they had paid forward the kindness once shown to them. Tristan, now fully mobile, waved goodbye to the device that had played such a pivotal role in his healing. With Marissa Farnett gone and the memory of her actions fading into the annals of Foxwood Court lore, the neighborhood thrived in a new atmosphere of mutual respect. Monthly socials, potlucks, and children's activities became the norm. Residents found they could address small problems without fear of random enforcement or sabotage. On a warm spring day, Lydia and Connor sat in the courtyard, watching Tristan chase after Bubbles with a few neighborhood children. Rosa joined them, sipping a lemonade, and they reflected on the incident that had once shaken the building. I never would have guessed something so terrible, Marissa snapping that wagon, would lead to so much unity, Rosa mused. But we rallied behind you. And look how well Tristan's doing now. Lydia nodded. He's proof that compassion can overshadow cruelty. We're so grateful for everyone's help. Connor smiled, leaning back on the bench. It's ironic. Marissa's sabotage led us to get an even better mobility cart. And in the end, the whole building improved its sense of community. They all sat quietly for a moment, soaking in the laughter of children echoing off the courtyard walls. After a time, Rosa spoke again. This is how it should be. A real neighborhood, where people look out for each other. I think that's the lasting legacy here, not her petty actions. They couldn't help but agree. In place of one person's tyranny, the residents discovered the power of collective kindness. Tristan, oblivious to the deeper meaning, giggled loudly as he caught a bubble on the tip of his finger. In that gleaming moment, everything felt right, like a promise that Foxwood Court would remain a community shaped by empathy rather than fear.